Hi, everyone, and welcome to Practice Growth HQ. Now, today we're going to talk about a topic that we have never spoken about before, which is about longevity, about stickability, about stayability in healthcare. Because it's fair to say you're listening to this podcast because you want to grow your practice. Well, one thing that's very hard to go past is people who just stick at it for years and years. And my guest today is Dr. Edward Feinberg. Now, Ed has got quite an interesting background, and importantly, for me, what I notice is the full range of different things that he's done. Now, he's a dentist and he was a practice owner at one point. He's now an author, he's an educator, he's an innovator. And it's really his journey that we want to go through so we can learn the lessons about stickability, about longevity to help you in your practice growth aspirations. Now, originally from the New York area, but now in Scottsdale, Arizona. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much.
All right, Ed, we like to start with the fast five, kind of quicker questions, quicker answers, so people can get to know you quickly. Question one, where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York, just north of New York City, and my father was a master and pioneer of full mouth reconstruction and crown and bridge dentistry. And he was my teacher and mentor. He was very well known and famous in his day, and I learned everything from him. And because of what I learned from him, I feel obligated to give back because a lot of my colleagues are having difficulty with Crown and Bridge, with problems that were solved in the 1930s.
Huh,
My dad and I and my dad's teacher never had these problems. So it pains me to see so many practitioners having difficulties.
all right. Question two, favorite book besides your own?
That's hard. I have a whole library here full of these books. I've read so many of them, and each one has something to offer. You can learn something from all these books. I think they're all really excellent.
Yeah, truth
Have,
is, I'm a big reader too. I've literally read a book a week for the last 4 years. So we're not saying it is the favorite one, but maybe just one you could mention to the listeners where you go, this was a really good book.
wow, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I've read so many of them. Most of them that are famous, I probably read them. And
Okay,
there's some really excellent ones out there.
no worries. All right, perhaps that's the message there, listeners, is read a lot. But Ed, if one pops into your head later in the conversation, feel free to mention it. All right, question three. What's one of your superpowers?
One of my superpowers, I think, is the ability to listen to patients. And I have a lot of different options for treatment in my armamentarium. And it can be very difficult to figure out what's really best for each patient. So you have to listen closely in order to what would hear them, what they want. What would you do if you had the problem that they have? It can be very difficult, and I will go to the ends of the earth to find answers for them if I
Okay.
don't have the answer.
I've heard it said two ears, one mouth. There might be a clue there. Yes, the power of listening. Question four, something you wish your 20-year-old self knew.
I was pretty naive. I was a dentist at 24. Had to learn the hard way. My dad was very much like Frank Lloyd Wright. We have the Frank Lloyd Wright house here in Arizona, and students would flock to him because he was the best. But he was very abusive to his students, and they endured it because they wanted to learn from him. So my dad was very much like that. And
Wow.
in the beginning, I did not really understand that this is the pussycat wearing the lion suit. And he would say things that were hurtful, or that's how he let off steam. And once I really understood him, we made a fantastic team, and I learned a lot from him. And it was worth all of that in order to learn from him. I think more young people should understand that rather than be offended that somebody said something, because in the long run, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, okay. Interesting insight. And finally, Ed, question five, something you're grateful for.
I'm grateful that I had my father to teach me, a mentor to teach me everything. and to show me how to do practice. So my practice was very different from everybody else's. I was trained completely differently from every one of my colleagues, and I see things differently from them as a result.
Okay.
I don't see many young people who want mentors. I want to be somebody's mentor in the way that my dad was a mentor to me, and I cannot find a single young person, and that's true for New York as well as Arizona, who wants a mentor. That
Mm,
really upsets me.
that's an interesting observation. I suppose, as the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know. All right, Ed. Well, our topic for today is about longevity and stayability, stickability. So, you've already mentioned you started as a dentist as a 24-year-old. You also alluded to the fact that there were a number of things in your practice that were quite different to other practices. Tell us about some of those.
Well, the focus of our practice really was longevity and health. And my background, which comes from the very roots of dentistry, has a 70-year track record. My dad started taking pictures of cases in 1950, and I have 70 years of documented evidence for what I'm doing. And it's endlessly fascinating. And what does it for me is when I get to see my patient come in year after year for their hygiene visit, and everything looks the same in the x-ray with very few changes, you did something good for that patient because
Hmm.
so many of their friends and relatives are having difficulties and they are not.
Yeah,
And so
interesting.
that's what does it for me.
Okay.
But to answer your question more directly, I think what really depends on longevity is interest and endless fascination and continuing education. Because in addition to giving education, I take a lot of courses. I want to see what they're doing out there, even if I don't agree. And I'm always learning something. So I never feel like I'm burnt out or I'm not interested anymore. I can't imagine not doing anything. I'm type A personality
Yeah.
and I'm wired that way. So I can't just retire and do nothing.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say I'm probably a similar type personality. My wife says, Ed, that I like being busy, and perhaps that's true. I don't mind the odd day off now and then. So tell me, were there ever days, because your career has spanned many decades, and we're going to get into the things that you did, but certainly that hunger for learning sounds like that's been a lifelong thing for you. Were there ever moments when you're running this practice in New York where you found yourself just going through the motions?
I never felt like I was going through the motions. There were days that weren't so wonderful, where things went wrong. There's no way to avoid that. But if you look at the things that go wrong as a learning opportunity, I want to know why they went wrong and what can I do to correct it? What could I do to prevent myself from making this mistake again? Then I don't mind so much. I'm going to take responsibility for it. I don't mind doing something over. I would never put something in a patient if I didn't think it was right. I would never do it because it's not going to work and you're going to have troubles. So I just try to figure out what went wrong, what I could do to learn from it so I don't make the same mistake the next time.
Yeah. So what would you say to a listener who's listening to this and they're going, like this, well done, boys. You're bringing lots of enthusiasm here, but I'm 20 years into my profession, and if I'm honest with you, it is feeling like a bit of a grind. Now, you've managed to get past that. What advice would you be giving to the listeners in that situation?
I think you have to sometimes take a step back and look at what you're doing. What interests you the most in you within your profession? Because you can't do everything and do it well. And concentrate on those things that really make you interested and fascinated with what you're doing and why you went into that field in the first place. So I think that is very helpful. So I also am doing a lot of things a little bit differently in my practice career. I was in full-time practice. And my first book took me 10 years to write because I didn't have a whole lot of time to devote to it.
Yeah.
But now I'm not doing as much practicing. I'm working on my teaching website. I'm working on my third book. My third book is a textbook also, but my second book is a collection of essays, the blogs that I wrote for my teaching website on issues that I see in dentistry. I'm
Mm.
very vocal. I sometimes look at myself as the gadfly of dentistry because I don't like a lot of things that I see.
Yeah,
And I can't, after the career I've had, I can't just look the other way and say nothing and say it's okay, because it's not okay.
yeah. So tell me something, as you said, it took you 10 years to write your first book. And listeners, if I can say, even if this is a book that you write and who knows, 100 people read it, 1,000 people read it. I'm not talking necessarily about a New York Times bestseller, but I've written two books and I'm currently working on my third. Tell us about what difference it makes to you, the writer, when you're writing on a book, because I know it's certainly been the case for me.
I really want to make a difference. I don't want my dad's legacy and my legacy to go by the wayside. I want to make sure that the information is passed on in some way and that maybe a future generation will see the value in it because it was really amazing. The things that I did and my dad's teacher did were simply amazing. And there are very few people who can do that kind of work. And even with all their fancy technology, they can't match that. And a lot of it is because the wrong principles are being taught in the dental schools. And so the students never learn how to do things properly when it comes to Crown and Bridge. That's not true in other areas of dentistry.
Right.
But I don't like it. I know it's wrong. And
Mm.
that's not an advancement when you have technology that violates basic principles that have a 70-year track record.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I would say from personal experience, when one becomes the teacher, in many cases, you learn a lot yourself. Because I can imagine Ed's toiling away as the dentist there, but he's also thinking, hey, I've got this book in the background. And in my experience, what it does is it opens up another part of your mind to where everything becomes a teaching opportunity. And the one thing is, when you do start teaching, whether that's in the form of writing a book or Ed's got an educational website, it actually crystallizes your own views because often we experience things, we react to things, and maybe we haven't thought deeply about it. But when you've got to tell somebody else about it, I find it's actually very good at really solidifying your own views. A number of years ago, Ed, somebody more or less dared me to record a live video every day for a year. And so I shot a Facebook Live, as it was back then, a Facebook Live video every single day for an entire year. And what I found is I would have started that going, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. But as time goes on, it's like a muscle. You get used to the muscle of thinking about something, trying to crystallize the thoughts and being able to deliver it in a persuasive or interesting way. So it's sometimes when you're the teacher, in many cases, you're the one who's being taught simply through that process.
Well, that's absolutely true. Teaching and learning go hand in hand. And
Hmm.
now I'm writing this book, and I have to explain the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing or saying what to do and why. So I have to do a lot of research to come up with supporting papers and that kind of thing that I learn from as well, because I don't know everything. And so that's absolutely true. When I put presentations together, it's the same thing, and I try to understand maybe where I didn't reach my students, what could I do better, how could I explain it better? Because a lot of what I teach is controversial or considered controversial, even though it came from dentistry's roots. Can you believe that?
Okay. So tell me, Ed, now before we got on air, you mentioned to me that as a practice owner, I mean, you've referenced the fact that in the space of Crown and Bridge, at least, you were probably doing some things that are a bit different. But you also mentioned that there are times took a deliberate approach in terms of marketing your practice differently. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. I never like to do things the way everybody else is doing it. So I didn't like the idea of advertising. And even though I know a lot of my colleagues are doing it, there was only one advertising thing that I did, and that was for the healthcare newspaper. And the reason why I did it is because not only did they give a full page for an ad, but they also gave a full page for me to write articles about dentistry and dental care. So I had a chance to educate people. So that appealed to me. But I did something very interesting that I think has tremendous value for any kind of practitioner. This chiropractor from Philadelphia somehow reached me with this marketing idea. And he was going to arrange for you to meet 50 different types of practitioners in your area. Some were physical therapists, some were like acupuncturists and adjunctive medical people for the most part. I met a lot of different kinds of people. And the idea was that you would establish a relationship with them, and then you would be able to refer patients to them, and then would be able to refer patients to you. And I learned a lot from that because I had no idea that the practices were so different. I was in a lot of chiropractors' offices and they were all different.
Mm,
So it was clear that if one chiropractor couldn't help somebody, another one could because
mm,
they had a different, completely different point of view. I
mm.
went to several plastic surgeons' offices. One plastic surgeon had four different lasers in his operating suite. So you know that no one knew more about lasers than him.
Mm.
And physical therapists too. I met one person who was specialized in hand physical therapy. And it just turns out that my office manager needed hand physical therapy. Guess where I sent her?
Yeah.
Because I knew I would never have known otherwise. So I learned a lot. I got to meet the chiropractor to the Yankees,
Huh.
and he had a TV show, and he had me on his TV show, and we became very good friends, and we sent each other patients. And that turned out to be really wonderful. I really enjoyed that. And I learned a lot from that too. So there are things that you can do outside the box. I also was in every single organization you could think of, the BNI and the Rotary Club.
Yeah.
And I got all of what I used to like to call them the village people, the mayor, the fire chief, all those people, because I knew them. We were all in the Rotary Club and they knew me and they became my patients.
Yeah.
So and also too, the BNI was very valuable, not to do forever because every Tuesday morning gets old after a while.
Yeah.
But I learned how to give a little elevator speech
Mm.
because if somebody asks you what you do, you have to separate yourself from everybody. Dentists are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
What makes me different from everyone else? In a minute, you had to learn how to do that. And
So,
that's not an easy, that was worth it. Just the price of that was worth it.
so what's your elevator pitch?
My goal now is to train dentists how to improve their crown and bridge to do better work.
But
But
what
when
was
I
it
was
for
a
your practice?
crown and bridge work, so I do work that I have options for patient treatment that nobody knows of. I can save teeth that very few people can save, and they want to extract all the teeth to place implants, which I'm against. I'm not against implants, I'm against their overuse and inappropriate use, which
Yeah.
is what I see now. So I want patients to understand that if one dentist can't save your tooth, maybe somebody else can, and they shouldn't hesitate to get a second opinion. So I save a lot of teeth that are flush with the gum without building them up or putting posts in. My approach is different than everybody else's, and I'm able to do what they consider impossible.
Okay. So is that the gist of your elevator pitch when you're in practice?
Yes, some of my best patients I got sitting at the diner counter for lunch. So, like my colleague now, who I practice with, she thinks that the best use of her time is to work through lunch and cram as many patients as she can in a day. Whereas I always went out for lunch. And I got some of my best patients and my best cases from sitting at the diner counter talking to strangers
How
because I was
interesting.
able to talk to them in a way that made them want to come to me, even though we had never met before.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I must admit, Ed, you're a bit of a kindred spirit. I was at a conference last week in Brisbane and I flew back in the pointy end of the plane because I had a few extra points. And a young gentleman sat down next to me, and he spent a bit of time trying to get his luggage into the overhead compartment. And the challenge was that his luggage was a helmet. And so as soon as he sat down next to me, I'm like, oh, sort of, I didn't know it was a helmet. I just could tell he was struggling to fit it in. Anyway, long story short, this guy is on the fast track to become either a touring car driver or maybe even Formula One. And it was about a 2 hour flight. And honestly, I'd had an exhausting week. By this point, it was like Sunday morning, and it had been long days, worked all day Saturday, etc. But I just chatted to this young guy. By the end of the 2 hour thing, we totally workshopped his personal branding. And like for me, it was just so much fun. And he's, oh, I really appreciate this. Can I get your details? Now, I don't know what will come of this. I did it because for me, it's fun. It's my superpower. This was what I discovered from this young gentleman, and this kind of curiosity I notice is a real theme for you, Ed. Like for me, once we'd sat there chatting about his business, he said the main problem with motor racing is that people drop out because they just don't have the money. Like for him and his business, and he was driving in, so this is a 19-year-old kid driving it. I need to do the maths, but he told me he was driving it like 250 kilometers an hour. I don't know, is that 130, 140 miles? It's fast. It's very fast. And, he said that for him to run his business was like $400,000 a year. And I said, so basically, your challenge is a sales and marketing challenge, and it's just driving is what you do. And he said, yep, that's basically the case. Like the difference between him and other people who get great success in the field is simply the ability to stick around, continue to fund what they're doing, and then eventually make their way to the top. So I think that's curiosity. Look, I get it, listeners. Sometimes you're just exhausted, and that's fine. But take a leaf out of Ed's book, that curiosity always, and as he said, getting new patients from the diner. That's fascinating. So tell me, was there one or two other things that you did that you think would be helpful for the listeners in terms of that longevity, both in terms of the longevity of the practice and also for keeping yourself fresh?
Well, I'm also very involved in the Dental Association with my colleagues. I've met colleagues from all over this country. And right now, I'm treasurer of my component organization of the ADA. And I'm on the annual sessions council for the Arizona Dental Association. And we're just about to have our big convention here in Arizona. I'm involved in that. And then I'm involved in the Dental Association on the national level, the Dental Editors Association. I'm vice president of that. And I'm chairman of prosthodontics for the Dental AI Association. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I really feel strongly that if we don't try to control the direction of AI, it's not going to be a wonderful tool for dentistry.
Mm,
So I'm involved in it because of that, because I have a real deep desire to make a difference. And there's so many different ways that you could make a difference. If you burn out in one aspect of practice, then you look at something else. There's always
mm,
something that you could do
mm,
in your area. I think that might be the perfect match for you.
mm,
I really believe that I was born into it. I was amazed at my father's genius. Everyone knew him. He was a genius
mm,
and he was my teacher. And because of that, I feel that I was sent here to earth to do that, to carry on this legacy and to try to make a difference and make things better. I really do believe that. So
mm,
that is my focus. So when you have a purpose and a focus like that, you are endlessly interested in what you're doing. I don't feel like I burned out. My
mm,
life is very different than it was in New York, completely
mm,
different. I do have a lot more leisure time
mm,
because I'm older. I don't think I could do full-time practice in the way that I did it in New York when I was younger. But that's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't be involved and do something a little bit different. So I think the idea of retirement, that's where cows go to pasture. I don't like that idea. I would
yeah,
say change is better, change of direction. You can't do nothing and just say, well, I did my time and now I'm going to do nothing.
yeah.
That was never my goal.
No, I'm 100% with you there, Ed. My joke is about taking up golf and fishing. A mentor of mine, a guy called Ty Lopez, says something that I found very interesting. He says, you want to try and live a life in such a way that people are not sure whether you're working or not. Like what you do for fun and what you do for work, it so seamlessly blends together. Now, that's not always possible to the nth degree, but I get that sense from you. Yes, I actually think the retirement model kind of work to your 60 and then hang up your drill in your case, whatever it is. For me, that's a total non-starter. Like the kind of intellect and active minds that got our listeners to where they are, that got you to where you are, you can't just hang that up and go, no, that's fine. I'm going to do nothing for the rest of your life. That sounds like a kind of one-way ticket to a fast death, dare I say.
Oh yeah, I know a lot of people who work really hard so they could retire, and as soon as they retired, they promptly drop dead.
Yeah,
I'm thinking,
yeah,
how sad.
indeed. Well, look, Ed, I really appreciate your time today. I think when I reflect back on this call, and our theme has been about longevity, firstly, I think all of the listeners could take a pinch of your kind of curiosity. That's one of the things that's definitely come for me from this. And I think the other thing that I really noticed was your ability, your willingness to go and do stuff. As you said, go and join the local chapters of different business groups. BNI is a business group. The local chapters of whether it's Rotary or the dental organization, or maybe you're a doctor or a physio or whatever. That sense of going and getting involved and, as you say, getting new patients from sitting next to someone at the diner, I think that's fantastic. Ed, if people want to learn more or get in touch, what should they do?
Well, it's very easy to get in touch with me. I have a teaching website. It's www.theonward, ONWARD program.com. And all my information is on that website. It's not hard to find me from that.
Okay.
And I also have two books on Amazon. One is a textbook on a very niche subject in dentistry, and the other is a collection of essays that were blogs on my website. And if they want to sign up, they'll be on my mailing list, and I will send them my blog every month so that they could read my take on the issues or things in dentistry that I either like or don't like.
Well, it's sometimes it's good to take a position. I will say, from a marketing point of view, it's actually good to take a position on things. Like you don't want to just always be bland, kind of vanilla. Sometimes you got to stand for something. As John Mellencamp said, you got to stand for something or you're going to fall for anything. All right, so it's Ed Feinberg, Feinberg, and just give us the website again, please. The
It's www.theonward, ONWARD
.com.
program.com.
theonwardprogram.com. Once again, Ed, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being such a great host.
All right, everyone. Well, we've covered a bit there, haven't we? And look, longevity's not necessarily something that you can just check the box and go, yep, done and dusted. It's a day by day, moment by moment proposition. But my hope for you from today's podcast is that you'll get a chance to just reflect on some of those micro steps you can take to give you a long and lovely career in the way that Ed has and help you grow your practice in the process. Finally, if you got some value from our time together, then I'd really appreciate if you'd head to where you heard this show, leave us a lovely review to give us the encouragement to bring you more great content every week on Practice Growth HQ.